North Carolina. I created and illustrated the card game Necronomicards, and I also work for a couple different agencies doing various types of graphic design, web design, that kind of thing.
Hi, my name is Anya. I am the Games Outreach Lead at Kickstarter. I'm assuming you all know what Kickstarter is, because this is a tabletop conference. And we're just doing what we say professionally, right?
And personally.
Oh, and personally. Personally, I'm a musician on the side. I play the saxophone. I play in a, yeah, nice, couple sax players there. I play in a disco punk brass band called the Funk Rest Brass Band, and I also play in a community wind ensemble in Brooklyn, New York called the Brooklyn Wind Symphony.
I didn't think I could like Anya more.
Oh, you're so sweet.
I was absolutely wrong.
Let's see what happens at the end of this panel.
We are all going to hate each other and love each other at the same time.
I am John Ritter. I'm one of the founders of Lay Waste Games, creators of Dragoon, creators of Human Era, which is on Kickstarter now, playhumanera.com, shameless self-plug. I also do consulting. I also do multimedia work. I also do a million different things to make money and be in the tabletop industry at the same time. So that's why I'm always stressed out. Hi, thank you, bye.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jenn Ellis, and I am the owner of Twogether Studios. We made the card game Illimat, which comes out tomorrow and available this weekend, except not because it was sold out. Yes. And the RPG called Phoenix Dawn Command, and soon-to-be Action Cats game. I am previously a product developer and designer, and also, I hate to use the Silicon Valley word, a growth hacker in software startups. And I work for a company full-time, but essentially I'm a person who needs to make something every day. So I bake, I knit, I do a whole bunch of things, and I'm got way more ideas than I have time, so that's me.
If you're wondering what a growth hacker is, it's exactly what it sounds like, and it's really gross.
So how we're going to structure this panel is I'm going to ask them some questions. You guys don't have to go on a line. You can go on a line if that makes you feel more comfortable, whatever you want to do. So the first question is, why do you think this is an important topic, balancing life and tabletop?
I guess I'll go first because it was my idea for the panel. When I proposed, so I'll give everyone a little background of the inception of this panel. I was thinking about panel ideas, and I said to my lovely girlfriend, who I think is watching right now, hi Liz, I have an idea for a panel. It's called Balancing Life and Tabletop, and she laughed in my face. Because I'm horrible at it. I basically work nonstop, and I'll occasionally get to breaking points where I emotionally, physically don't know what to do because I love working with games and I love everyone in the industry, including everyone on this panel, and I don't want to not do it, but physically sometimes I can't, and I don't know how to deal with it. So that's where the idea came from, and that's why I thought it was important, because it affected my life personally.
I think the other thing to add to that is also, I think one of the challenges that I think any sort of creative field has, whether that's music, games, knitting, baking, any sort of creative output, is because it is a hobby and it's because it is something that's supposed to be looked at as sort of oh, this is my stress reliever. When that ends up becoming your full-time job, I think there's a misconception that it's oh, I'm working in games. This is what I'm making I'm a full-time game designer. That doesn't mean that you play games 100% of the time. If you're a musician, you're not gigging 100% of the time. If you're an artist, you're not necessarily creating art 100% of the time. And so the hobby ends up becoming more of a stress factor sometimes, depending on what it is. So having those sort of outside other creative influences, or even just downtime of whatever it is that makes you happy, is super, super important. I think that's the balance that is extremely difficult to obtain.
Andy or Jen, do you want to?
Yeah, I think I can, as you can as well, talk about many game companies are also owned by couples who work together to put out that precious cardboard. And that balance is also, something where we have a thing in our family where I ask a question and I sometimes have to say, I'm asking as your wife, not as your business partner. So how to balance that. So my relationship right now is definitely enmeshed with our business and games, and so is my life. So balance is not just personal balance as far as my my work, but also my relationship and how to kind of keep that balanced.
Yeah, it's hard to be romantic when you're talking about spreadsheets and business plans and, is this game balance? And you're like, I mean, could we
When is
just-
that shipping?
Yeah, is that shipping early?
I think, like, the hardest part for a lot of people can be just remembering that you have to turn it off sometimes, and you have to, like, walk away, and just because you're working for yourself, like, that doesn't mean you should do it 24 hours a day,
Yeah.
because other people depend on you sometimes, and, yeah, it's just, it's really hard to try to strike that right
Yeah.
chord.
My husband's the kind of person who wants to work all the time, and he just wants to work when he wants to work, and I'm like, no, let's work on Tuesdays and Thursdays, you know, or let's, like we need to schedule it, because if we don't, we'll just work constantly, because if we're both up at 1 a.m. and we're both bored, it's like, do we watch another episode of TNG, or do we balance our card game? Like, which one do we do?
TNG should always win.
It usually does. So what's a specific strategy you employ to balance, to balance your life in tabletop, and what works and what doesn't work? Sorry about my voice also.
I'm almost losing mine too. I think a big part for me is just to really keep in mind that even though it feels like it's something I'm passionate about, and it feels like art, and it feels like I'm just creating something, at the same time you have to remind yourself that it's a job, and you have to, like, set boundaries and time, like, actually keep track of how much time you're working, and just really try to think about it from a business perspective, so that you don't just live in that world all the time.
Yeah, part of when you're an indie developer, you're usually not paying yourself. So setting up boundaries is really important, because, and also keeping track of the hours is important, because you're like, I just worked 10 hours. Like, you have to remember that. You have to put that in perspective of what you've been working on.
Yeah, think about it like you're going to an office,
Yeah.
even if you're not, like, even if you work from home like I do, and you're just kind of managing yourself.
Yeah.
I think something that has been working for us is for us to identify what kind of company we want to be. Because you can, or, you know, even on a micro level, well, what kind of Kickstarter do you want to have? What kind of game do you want to make? And sometimes, and trying to separate ego of what you would like to have happen, because it would be fun and, you know, this would be like a huge hit, versus, well, what's something that what's really driving us? And sometimes it's just making the game and seeing people be happy and enjoying the idea. And sometimes that means, well, we'll do a 2-week Kickstarter, and we'll print it locally, and we'll make a really small batch, and we'll just see what happens. Or we won't go to all of the conventions because that's a lot of travel, and we'd be exhausted. So we tend to make a lot of decisions that I sometimes am embarrassed to share, because it feels counterintuitive to what success is, but it is important for us to save and keep ourselves and our relationship something that's healthy, and like I said, I'm a person who has a lot of ideas, so I am constantly setting up boundaries for myself, breaking them down myself, and then reestablishing them. So I'm not saying I'm perfect, because I'm someone who is constantly trying to do other things, you know. I did a Kickstarter in which I made, I think, 10 to 12 different products, so, you know, it was ridiculous.
No.
But it was, I think, identifying what is it that you really want to do. And sometimes that means saying no to things that just seem really shiny and bright and meaningful as far as success, but it could just be a lot of time. So.
I just want to point out that John has a 1,000-yard stare right now, like he just got back
Yeah,
from
I'm learning. I'm learning. So out of curiosity, who in here works in the industry currently? Raise your hand.
Raise it high.
It doesn't matter
raise
if
it high. I
that's,
mean,
yeah,
if you
full-time
make
or
a
Even if you're
game,
just doing it
yeah.
for yourself.
And
Yeah.
who here is interested in it? And then who here doesn't and just plays games and loves games?
Yes.
Awesome.
Thank you.
We love you, thank you.
Who does it but is not interested in it?
Yeah.
Who came into this room by accident and actually,
Welcome.
Not us.
Yeah, just because I think a lot of us, I mean, Anya was mentioning earlier, like there's a certain point where you make a shift from it being a hobby into it being a job. And even when you're in the hobby spot of it, like you still want to balance that, right? Like you still want to be able to play games, have a good time, but, you know, go outside sometimes. Which, you know, I'm against. I prefer the darkness. But yeah, the reason I have 1,000-yard stairs, because I'm just trying to think of like what have I done? Like I think that it's important to make those boundaries, but I also think it's important to work your ass off. Because I definitely wouldn't be where I am unless I worked some 80-hour weeks, unless I didn't sleep some nights. Like when we were building the Kickstarter earlier this week, when we were filming things, when I was building walls for this convention, like there were some nights where I got some short amounts of sleep. There were some days where I worked some 20-hour days. And there's always going to be other people out there working hard. And just as long as I don't think that everyone has to work harder. I don't know, that's probably a bad thing to say.
Right, right.
But work more
Work
efficient.
smarter?
Work smarter, but I don't want to poo-poo working a lot, because I think that that's important, even though I might do it too much sometimes.
So I think that goes into my next question,
Yeah.
which is about burnout.
Yeah.
Can you talk about burnout and how to combat it? And I want to comment on something Jenn said. It's just 5 minutes of us sighing, all of us sighing. So Jenn mentioned, you know, sometimes it's hard when you see something shiny and you have to not go after that thing. And for me, I want to go to every convention. I just want to be there. I just want to work every convention. I want to work my ass off. I want to get there early. I want to leave late. And it's partially because that's when I see a lot of my friends. And that's when I see a lot of people I care about. But it's also when I'm hustling, and it's when I can sell the most games, and it's when you make the biggest margin. And so, like, one of the biggest things for me in combating burnout was learning how to say no to events, which is, it still breaks my heart when I have to say no to an event, but I'm definitely, like, getting better at accepting that about myself.
Yeah, I mean, the cost of an event is huge. Like I just had someone tell me, like, well, how much did you spend to get here? And I told him. He's like, well, couldn't you just use that to do something else? And I was like, I guess so. And I was like, but you have to work so hard, and you have to do this, and you have to do all the things, and kill yourself. And he's like, no, you gotta think about it, like, you know, money and time going into something, and what do you get out of it? And I think that sometimes, me personally, my mentality is just like work as hard as humanly possible until I pass out, which probably isn't a good thing.
Plus, conventions are a lot more fun than Facebook ads.
For sure, yeah, right?
So
Yeah,
true.
you can play games in a lobby at a convention. You can't do that on a Facebook lobby.
I think I'm sort of uniquely positioned here where, like, my hobby is not necessarily games. I love games. I've been in the games industry almost 10 years. Video games is more of my focus, so tabletop has been sort of a new space for me, and it's been really interesting to kind of like navigate that, and I absolutely love it. But for me, burnout is always a little bit of a challenging thing, because I'm just now this year like starting to learn to say no to things, and I feel extremely guilty when I do. But I've also realized that it's better for me to say no to something, because I want to make sure that I'm at 100% in whatever it is that I do. So let's say that I'm at, like, even if I'm at 80%, I'm not giving 100% to something where I know I could have been at 100. So it's better to say no, knowing that there's probably going to be a similar or the exact same opportunity, either like 6 months to a year, whatever it is down the road. But last year I was like really tired all the time, and I couldn't figure out what was going on around the same time last year. And I, like, no matter how much I was sleeping, I was just exhausted. And so I finally kind of realized that I was, like, literally suffering from exhaustion. And so I went to visit my sister, who lived in Hawaii at the time, for the holidays, and it was just 2 weeks of sleeping, and I went to Hawaii to sleep. And, like, hang out with my sister and my nieces, like, that was cool too. But I spent 2 weeks just sleeping. And so it was this sort of realization of, like, okay, I feel kind of sick, but I'm not sick. Oh, that's exhaustion. And that's immediately when I was like, I have to just kind of like recharge myself a little bit, even if it's that like I did the Celebrity Secret Hitler tournament last night, and knowing that that's what I would have to do at 10:30, I went back to my Airbnb and I just sat in my room with all the lights off for 15 minutes.
that's a
And
good
it was
idea.
just
That
like,
sounds amazing.
That sounds so glorious.
it was just like
sounds
recharging
amazing
myself
right now.
and just sitting. And like there were conversations going on around me, you know, like I was maybe like messing around on my phone a little bit, but like it was that 15 minutes that I needed where it wasn't like, oh, I'm not gonna see this person for another year. I have to do this dinner, I have to do this, I have to do that. Like, no, I'm gonna take 15 minutes and just like sit by myself. So even just like, I think we tend to think in things in a little bit of like, there's a lot of hyperbolic speak. So I think even just taking 15 minutes to yourself, if that's sitting in a dark room, if that's just like, I also have an addiction to the Real Housewives. So just like watching Housewives, knowing that like these women are gonna yell at each other and I'm not gonna have to think about it is like, cool, this is just what I need to recharge myself and that will get me back to 100. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely.
Cool.
And burnout doesn't just come from events. Like, burnout from making games itself can be a major issue too, because you stare at the same thing all day, every day, and making tiny changes and staring at the same permutations of the same stuff, and it's like, I want to still like my game, but I have looked at it for so long that it's really hard to remind myself to enjoy it.
Can I throw this in the garbage? This
Yeah.
is painful. Yeah. So you guys talked about how getting into the games industry often cuts down on the amount of time that you can play games, even though that's not how people may feel on the outside. So what do you feel the difference is between working in games and having the time to play games? If that makes sense.
There's a lot of sighing here.
Well, I think, I mean, I'm coming at this not from a game designer standpoint, but I am coming from this of like, I've had a lot of weird games in the industry, and I think sometimes it's really hard to kind of turn off that, like, I worked in sort of publishing for a little bit, and so playing a game and turning that part of my brain off, that's like, I want to give you feedback from like a publisher standpoint, versus just like sitting down and just playing somebody's game, or like hearing about a game that looked really interesting, or just seeing it somewhere and then playing it on my own time. Turning that part off, I think, is one of the biggest challenges. A lot of my game design friends have all said they have the same sort of challenge of like, this is how I would make this game better.
Yeah,
And not from like a fan standpoint, which is great too, sorry.
Oh, no.
But just like, you get so, you know, if you do this 8 hours a day, it's completely normal that you're gonna like, that's just kind of where your brain is gonna go.
Yeah, it's tough because once you start getting in that mindset, every time you sit down, you're like, this is gonna be really fun. I'm gonna play a board game. And then as soon as you start playing, it's like, oh, I wanna steal this. Oh, I would change this. Oh, but that doesn't look quite right. And it's like, no, just roll the dice. Just
You got to
have fun.
Real Housewives it.
Yes.
Yeah, you got
Oh,
to.
is there a Real Housewives
If
board
anybody
game?
wants to talk housewives after this, come see me.
Anya, you should make a Real Housewives board
Oh my
game.
God, it was all I want.
I think I started playing a lot of classic old games when we were designing Illimat, our newest game, because it's inspired by old games. And ever since then, I've actually been on a steady diet of classic old games. You know, no themes, there's no like donuts and cats. And those things are good in anyone's diet, trust me. But it is something for me that I can just, I mean, these are true and tried, you know, cribbage and backgammon and pinochle. And it really, it brings me to what I really like about gaming, which is using my brain in a way that has an ending. You know, I can end the loop at the end of the time, but I'm not opening up the box and pricing out the materials and wondering why they didn't go with something, or really mad
Why
about
is this box so big with these few components?
why did they use Comic Sans? You know, just stuff like that. It's just
Why did they make all the dragons out of metal? It would be so much cheaper to use
you're
plastic.
don't, do we want to get into that, man? Oh.
Andy, I need you to leave.
And I think it was kind of my way of wanting to keep the hobby in my life, but to turn off the business side, and it's really, really helped. And there's some wonderful, wonderful old games, and if you ever have a Lyft driver or from another country, ask them what card games that they play, and you'll like, it opens up a whole new world of the types of old games that are out there. So I recommend that.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah,
great
it's a
idea.
pro tip.
Yeah, I'm gonna start doing that now.
So I'm going to put some of these questions together that I actually wanted. So one of them is, how do you turn off game work and have fun? Which I think goes into another question, which is, what new hobbies have you had to create for yourself that aren't gaming?
It's not necessarily.
Boxed wine.
Yeah, boxed wine is my friend. It's not necessarily a new hobby, but I've started focusing a lot more on art. Like, I was always an artist, and that's kind of what led me into wanting to design and illustrate games to begin with. But I've been really trying to force myself to go back and do a lot more painting and sculpting and stuff like that. That's just like, this is for me. I can just go with it. Nobody else might even see this. Like, it just feels so good to like put a brush to a canvas instead of playing with the walking tablet all day. And like, it's so nice to just get your hands dirty and do something natural like that.
And I think it's hard too when your work is so public facing to work on something that you're not going to show to anyone. That's like private. But I think that's also important.
Yeah.
I like non-game related things. I mean, I also like, I think because music is such a huge part of my life and my identity, I think it's also like, it's easy for me to say like, music stuff. But even with that, like, playing in 2 bands is great, and we're constantly like, basically my life is like going to work, going to conventions, going to gigs, going to rehearsal, which is wonderful. Like, that's an incredible life.
And your husband.
Oh yeah, and I'm married. I've been married.
What's up, Brian?
No, sorry, I love you. I've been married about 2 months, so it's like, it's yay. Yay. And he's wonderful, and I'm extremely lucky because even though we don't work together, he works in games, and he comes as a volunteer, and he gets so excited seeing everything, so I get to kind of see things through his eyes for the first time, which is like, it's just, I'm extremely lucky to have the life that I do. But I also get stressed, like, I'm a human, allegedly. But
I mean, you're lucky, but you also worked your ass off to get here.
I do. So I try to find other ways to kind of like de-stress. And so one is, I used to be really big into running. I ran a lot, and that unfortunately created a lot of injuries. So I have a bunch of like knee and ankle and hip problems. So I've started doing a lot more yoga and weightlifting. Yoga has been instrumental in me managing stress. Weightlifting has been instrumental in me managing stress. I'm trying to like, I get stuck in routines really quickly, like, okay, I want to eat this every day at the same time, I want to do this specific thing at the same day at every time, and that ends up being like monotonous. So I'm trying to like try different recipes or different foods, find different challenges for myself. And now with music, like, that can also get super like, this is when rehearsal is, I play this note at this time, I do this, like, very structured and rigid when it should be a little bit more flowing. So I'm trying to look at music from different lenses and like do a little bit more musical improv, just in terms of like jazz saxophone stuff, and do transcriptions of pieces, which is, if you've never tried to transpose a Miles Davis solo, oh boy.
Oh man. I follow celebrity couples on Tumblr for like all the gossip. It's kind of just like a lovely. I've just
Who's
really.
your favorite? Who's your favorite?
I'll get to that in a second. I gotta.
John, let her get through this.
Excited. I'm excited.
Essentially, I think it's something that I've never really shared before because I feel embarrassed about it. But now I just realize, like, it is so relaxing, and just the awful stuff that's on there, it just makes me think, like, I can handle any customer service email after seeing, like, what people think of Jenny Slate after dating Chris Evans, and
Yeah.
they're my favorite. And they might be back together, and it's totally making it's going to be really good.
Wait, really?
Amazing.
Yeah.
Oh my God, yes.
Sometimes you just need petty shit
Yeah.
and like
it's fine.
brainless shit, like Real Housewives or
And
Tumblr celebrities.
And I think it's because it's also mine. I mean, it kind of goes back to like being in a relationship and being business partners. My husband is Keith Baker, who has designed a lot of games like Gloom and Eberron for D&D and lots of other stuff. And so he doesn't have a lot of interest in that. But he will want to go on and on about, like, a 5e rule or something, and he'll need to get it out, and I'm listening, and then I'm like, okay, can I talk about Outlander episode, though? And so I have something that he doesn't get, but I'm really into, that I get to, like, go off on, and that has nothing to do. And so it's just kind of nice to have something where it's not really cerebral, and it's just totally fluffy, and it's kind of great.
And Jen, I would just like to throw this out there too. So our husbands last night had a very intense bromance about D&D where they got deep into it. If at any point you want to talk about celebrity gossip, I am your woman.
All right. I feel a couples gaming night coming on.
I love everything happening right now. John, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, this is making me realize that I need hobbies, I need outlets.
Yeah.
My hobbies right now are like doing multimedia work, because that's what I used to do before gaming, and I like do that every now and then. Like someone's like, hey, we're coming to Boston for a photo shoot, we need locations. I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Like, go buy a bunch of basketball. Like, oh my God. I had to buy a bunch of basketballs for something last weekend. It doesn't matter. It stressed me out.
sounds really
It stressed me out. Yeah, I was like buying basketballs. I had to buy like a black one and like marker. It was crazy.
I mean, my hobbies are like nachos.
Yeah,
Like,
well,
literally
I'm
nachos.
binge watching that '70s show,
Oh,
which
that's
is pretty
so good.
awesome.
So good up here.
Yeah, so binge watching television shows, I guess. I gotta find some more. This is making me realize. that I
Step by step.
maybe next.
It is problematic in the best way.
I went Cheers, then I went Frasier. Now I'm at that '70s show. So like, I'll get
We
there.
started watching Star Trek at the beginning because I've
Oh,
never
yeah.
watched it. It took us 6 years to get through the original series, and it's taken us 5 months to get through 5 seasons of TNG.
She is so good.
TNG's the best.
So
TNG's the
good.
best. Like,
Thank you for the clapping. I really appreciate it. We're going to do a Q&A at the end. Sorry. So this last question is a pretty heavy one. We wanted to talk about living with mental illness and taking time for ourselves, because there's a lot of potential for emotional labor, especially if we are, in a relationship within the gaming industry, but also just doing a lot of work, overworking. So if you guys want to comment on that or talk about that a little bit.
I've always overworked in every job I've ever had, whether it was gaming, in startups, software. And I realized I really liked work. But the biggest thing for me was owning my own business and having autonomy. Because one of the things that I identified what burned me out is making money for other people. And also not feeling like I had a seat at the table on the same footing. I was a woman in technology for 20 years. I've been mansplained a lot in my life. It was also high pressure. It was like medical software, so like if we had a bug, it was an FDA problem and stuff. I feel like a big thing for me was taking the leap of doing something that I had more autonomy over. It didn't mean I worked less, but it meant that I could fully embrace my mistakes and learn from them rather than having someone have that over me. And also that I could try something that sounded really weird to other people and have it be successful, which is probably one of the best feelings of your life. So I'm not sure if I answered your question.
No, that was,
Okay.
yeah. And I think a lot of what you're saying is that you want to be in control.
Well, my therapist might agree with you, but
Yeah,
I mean,
being a control freak comes
Jenn, you're
naturally.
amazing.
no, I think
You want to be in control. You want to be able to own your own mistakes,
Yeah.
but also be in control of. You don't want to be beholden to anyone else.
there's autonomy. I own my business, but I still work for other people. I'm working for backers. I'm working for business partners. I'm working, there is a lot of people I still work for.
Right.
But I can share a vision of something and they go, okay, and that's good, because I don't worry about it, I'll just make it happen. So it feels good to do that. And that, I think, was the part that was missing for me in my other jobs, where I would work the same amount of hours, I put the same amount of energy into it, but because I couldn't own that for myself, that was a really hard part for me, and I think that was the part that just made me depressed about it. Whereas I haven't felt that way. Plus, I'm someone who has different levels of energy and focus throughout the day, and having a lot of autonomy in how I schedule myself. My brain is feeling very clear right now, and I can sit down and do something. This is a good time for me to do it, rather than I have to be sitting at a desk from 9 to 5. That really, really worked. So in some ways, I feel like I've gained a lot by working for myself and working in the industry. But I still overwork, but I think that just identifying what I need and how to carve it out has been really good.
You were saying
Oh, no, it's just, when you were talking about, part of the reason why you did that was because you wanted to be in control.
Yeah.
Is like, I think being, control freak's a strong word, but I think that comes naturally with game designers where you really just want to have your hand in everything, and you really
Yeah.
want to like, and I'm personally really bad about that. I mean, I made a game where I did literally the entire thing, so
Yeah.
it's like, I just wanted everything to be perfect and spend all your time on it. And it's awesome, and it's super fulfilling, and it really makes you feel like, you know, it makes you feel that much more passionate about everything. The flip side to that is that it can also be kind of isolating, because you can wind up spending all of your time just working on that one thing. And so you have to remind yourself, like, oh, there are other humans. Maybe I should call my mom. Maybe I should get on Facebook for a minute, because that's the answer to everything.
I mean, my little personal story, my mom came to the convention today, and she was by my booth, and I was not around. And then I went to the booth, and she literally hands me the phone, and my girlfriend's on the phone, because I hadn't called her in like 2 days. And I was like, hi. I was like, you know, it's weird to like, sometimes you just shelter yourself, and you don't realize like, oh, there's another world out there. Like, when do you stop? When do you take a breath? When do you go, oh, let's be happy now? Like, we've done the thing, let's be happy now. Don't worry about the next thing, like, just take a moment. Like, it's tough.
Yeah, so I live with a mental illness. So I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety a couple years ago, which manifested itself into an eating disorder, so I'm in recovery. I'm very open about it. I don't have any qualms talking about it. I've been in recovery about 2 years. And I think, ironically or not, the games industry, especially once I moved from my old job to Kickstarter, is kind of what has helped my recovery more than anything, partially because this industry in particular is extremely open about any sort of mental illness, much more than any other industry that I know. And so I felt very isolated and confused and lost with having my own struggles of feeling very like, oh, I'm the only one that has this, I'm the only one that does this. And so being able to kind of open up in panels like this and being able to open up with like my coworkers, my own boss is absolutely wonderful and so supportive and will say like, are you taking care of yourself? Like I've never had a boss ask me that before. That's pretty incredible. But even just my own peers and colleagues and like people that are associated with Kickstarter, whether they're creators or backers, people are extremely open about things, and that's been instrumental in my recovery, whether that's like, I can't go eat today, or I don't have time to eat. I'll have people check me and say like, you definitely do. We're gonna do this together, or something like that. So it's been extremely challenging, but it's also been like, not to sound too dark here, but I don't think I would be here if I hadn't, number one, gotten help, and number two, like made the shift that I did and started opening up about things that I was struggling with. So I'm extremely thankful for everyone that I've met.
The industry's super, like, everyone that I've worked with, including everybody on this panel, like, is super nice. And whenever I've ever needed anything, everyone's always been, like, there to talk about things, so.
Well, except when you texted me when I was driving.
I know, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I was like, she's giving me one-word answers. Anya hates me.
No, and I was like, I am in a car doing this, looking for police.
No, I also, I was diagnosed with anxiety, and it gave me stomach problems. I had gastroparesis, so I had to change my whole diet. I had to change a lot of other things, and I feel like a lot of the problem was that I wasn't letting myself be creative. At the time, I was working full-time, and I was going to grad school, and I was working with a lot of creative people, and when we finally, like, started making board games, like, oh God, it just felt so good, and it felt so right, and like, watching other people love our games, and watching that moment when people get it, and then like, making friends in the board game industry, like, it's like a family. Like, the reason I love Con so much, and I think the reason it's so easy to forget that there's an outside world, is because, oh my God, it's 72 hours with your other family that you see every 3 months.
Yeah.
So, you know, this, I feel very similarly to, I don't think I would be here, and if I was, I wouldn't be as healthy as I am. Mm-hmm. I say with my voice going out.
It was dramatic. It actually added a Whether or not you guys are here afterwards, we're all going to be hugging it out up here.
Oh, yeah.
No.
Oh, yeah.
That's where I draw the line.
Oh,
I'm kidding.
no.
I'm kidding.
So I don't have any more questions. If there's anything else that you guys would like to add before we open it up to questions, is there anything else you guys want to say?
Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to us have a private bitch session in public.
So if anybody wants to ask questions, we have a little over 20 minutes. There is a pink line of tape right on the floor right here, and the enforcers have a microphone. So please get in line. Please don't feel embarrassed about exposing your deepest thoughts to us.
And if you want to privately ask a question, you can
Oh,
tweet
yes.
you're welcome to like tweet or DM me at
Yeah,
John
yeah.
Ritter.
And if you have any questions about Chris Evans or Jenny Slate, I can handle.
And
I
any,
do. I have
any
so many.
housewives questions, I'm more than happy to take.
Yes, young man.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Thanks for calling me a young man.
You're so beautiful.
I love you, Nicole.
I love you, Kyle.
Okay.
I love you, stranger.
This is gross.
Anyway, do you guys, when balancing life and work stuff, doing your more independent work, what sort of like productivity programs, apps, etc., do you guys utilize to keep yourselves on track? And do you integrate that into setting boundaries for yourself for your like non-working life?
I will just say I aggressively ignore my Trello.
I was just
Yeah,
about to
me
say
too.
how much I
Me
use
too.
Trello.
I use it, but
Trello is the
I
best and worst.
hardcore ignore it, unfortunately.
So my husband, it was great. My husband set up a Trello for us. He set up a Trello board. And then a couple days later, I was like, how are your design cards going? And he was like, "Pfft, I got overwhelmed with that within 5 minutes of setting it up. He's like, I haven't even opened it.
I actually set reminders on my phone telling me to look at my Trello board so
Oh,
that
that
I don't
sounds
put it.
so-
But then I start ignoring the reminders, and so then I'm just clearing those out every day.
I like to say my starred emails are the most important emails that I ignore.
I really love notebooks, paper. I really like graph paper because visually it just makes me feel contained, and it kind of organizes the chaos a little bit. So it's just a really good canvas to work from. I have tried every app that you could think of to organize yourself and use them for, a couple weeks and then not, just like everyone else here. And I still think that a good old-fashioned notebook is good. I don't do like the full bullet journal stuff because it's just a little bit too much signal to noise for me, but
It's also hard to keep up with. I feel
Yeah.
obligated,
Yeah.
and then that defeats the purpose. It
Yeah.
makes me anxious.
And I used to also try to segue out things, but I try to just look at my day as my day rather than what's work and what's life. I used to have a manager when I worked for General Electric. Believe it or not, I worked for a big, giant company. And she just had one day of the week for each page. So she would say, well, let's, follow up next week. And so she would just turn page 7, write that down. And then, so she had like tasks ahead, and it was just like the most simple system. I try to do that, but it tends to just be like, I pick up a notebook and then I lose that one, and then I have another one. So they're not
Or
really
you
like.
have like one word on 8 pages that are really far apart from each other, and you're like, what is this?
But I still constantly go back to paper and pen. And in the last couple of weeks, I'm fulfilling 2 Kickstarters at the same time right now, and like doing a lot of stuff. So it's been a little crazy. And the graph paper has just been my friend. I love it. So
I also like the moleskin journals that are dotted, so you can make your own graph.
yeah, that's good. That's good stuff.
Slack, big ups to Slack.
Yeah, Slack's awesome.
Shout out to Google Docs.
Yep.
I use Evernote like crazy.
Yeah.
Never know, yeah.
Yeah, these are awesome.
Hey guys.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Rob.
In terms of apps, so I really just kind of have like 2 comments, but both of them are kind of about shutting off. I forget who in the middle part of the sentence there.
Oh,
Anya.
Anya.
About
Anya.
going back to your B&B and just, sitting in the dark for a while. So there's 2 great ways to do that here, actually. One great way to do it here is actually the A&K room. So the guys from Take This organization did a great job of setting that. So if anybody needs to just go there.
I don't know what an A&K room. Could you explain that?
means
is?
Away from keyboard.
Oh,
AFK stands for like, it doesn't really work in a tabletop.
Sure.
It started as a video game thing.
It's
cool.
WoW
You
speak.
can color.
I think I just heard the acronym differently from everyone else. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
But that's cool.
It's an
And then also
FMK room.
something you can speak to is distractions from screen time. There's an app on iPhone that I like that's called Forest, which is basically you turn on this app, and the goal is to leave that app on and not work with any other apps, and it's basically a tree that's growing. The longer you can just leave that app running. And that incentivizes you to stay away from your phone, focus on your work, focus on something else. And then once you pick your phone up and you're ready to use it, you get to plant that tree in your forest, and you're kind of making a nice forest for yourself. That's just a neat app. But to that point, what can you guys say about like shutting off or like getting yourself away from all the distractions that we have in this?
Well, I think first of all, I fundamentally think it's hysterical that we need an app on a phone to shut our screen off. Also, I think like we can say this is what works for us, but the thing is like you need to find what works for you, right? Like for me, it's sitting in the dark for 15 minutes. Through a lot of trial and error, that's what I've realized is what I need to shut off, and that's what I need to recharge. That could be something like if you like to color, if you like to knit, if you like to do something that's like quick and easy, if that's the amount of time that you have to shut off. Like try as many weird, interesting things that you want. If that's, 15 minutes of meditation with a meditation app, perhaps.
It's Headspace. I'm
Headspace,
obsessed with
yeah.
Headspace.
Yeah, you got to find what works for you.
I actually wanted to ask you about your yoga. Do you do that at home? Do you go to a studio? Like, how do you make time for that in your schedule?
So there's a couple different ways that I do it. There's a yoga studio like down the street from my apartment, which is really cool. So Kickstarter offers yoga in the office,
That's
which is great,
amazing.
and the instructor is amazing. There's also a YouTube creator, I guess, called her series is called Yoga with Adrienne. And it's like a very chill, like kind of easy introduction. But I've been I've been doing yoga for like 10 years, so I can kind of just do it by myself. Just like I know what I need, like turn the lights off and like maybe light a candle or something in my apartment, and then just go through a series of like sequences.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's cool. This is a product of being from California.
So I don't know if any of you have kids, or if you just have friends that have kids, but do you have any advice about how to balance all of this stuff? Also, as a parent, as an expectant mother, I'm still trying to balance life and gaming, and now another eating. So do you have any advice about how to balance all of those things?
I don't have children.
I do have children, and I have no advice. I have not figured out how to do that yet. I have a daughter who's about to be 4 years old, and it's like you basically just have to set aside days where you're like, I'm not going to do anything but focus on my child. I mean, I'm not saying I only focus on my child on those days, but like you never feel like on any given day you give them as much attention as you should. Like I try to spend as much time as I can with her before she goes to bed. I'll try to do work after she's in bed. I'll do work while she's at preschool, that kind of thing. But you still have to pick other days where you're just like, this is your day. We're gonna go do stuff that's awesome, and that's the only way you can really feel like you're doing well by them, I guess.
How often do you do that? I know nothing about children, so.
Other than they exist.
Believe
than
it
I
or
was
not,
one?
you were one once. Yeah.
Really?
I don't buy it. There's not like a
set.
set number of days a month that I do it or anything. I just try to do it as often as I can clear my schedule and do it.
The Geek Mom and Geek Dad's website have some really, really great articles and people who talk about that a lot, so I recommend them. Yeah.
I would also say, first, congratulations. Second, I don't know whatever happened to this. I know this has been a discussion in film, but one of the challenges of being a woman in the industry, and if you do want to become a mother and you want to, be a parent, there is unfortunately still a lot of stigma attached to that. So if you coming to a con for 4 days is nobody, if you're a mother and you're essentially like the caregiver to the child, like you just can't, it's not gonna happen unless you have an extremely supportive partner who's willing to come with you, and like it works sometimes, but for the most part, a lot of women end up dropping out of this industry. I would encourage you to reach out to conference organizers and say, hey, is there going to be childcare? I'd love to attend. I'm just curious to know what that policy is. The more women that we can start, and men, that we can kind of get that conversation going, I think the better it's going to be.
I would also like to say, so something that I've finally started to get over being embarrassed about is I read a lot of self-help books. And one of the ones that I'm reading right now is called Drop the Ball. And her perspective on how to organize a to-do list and how to focus on what your real inner goals are is like life-changing. And she gives advice, but also tells a narrative of her life. And it's falling in love, finishing school, getting a career, helping her husband achieve his goals and get a career, and then them having children, and the way that they balance domestic life and how they look at each other's responsibilities, and it's amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi, Jen.
Hi.
Hello.
My new friends.
Hello.
Hi.
Anya, I love that comment, and I'm going to back you up on that. I used to run Origins, I used to co-own Kublacon, do that, right? That's why I started childcare at Origins and at Kublacon, now it's going strong, so what she said.
That's awesome.
And if I may recommend to the app person question, is yes, I don't have an app for you, but read the book. Read the book. If you don't have time to do it right, when will you have time to do it over?
Audiobooks.
Get an app, I guess. I don't know.
Have the app read it for you.
Grow a big tree. While you read Growing the Tree, read that book. Any of both you guys, you would benefit from that book. And also you can grab it. Down with that. Here's my question. If you have a problem with this, how do you solve it? I have a big problem with this. As a creative, how do you not monetize something, right? So I'll get into it. Like I started cooking as well, and then I started talking to my friend James about filming the things that I'm cooking and doing like a YouTube thing, right? Like I couldn't not monetize it, right? And I don't know if you have that problem, but you know.
Is it a problem?
Yeah, that sounds like a great problem.
At that point,
I see.
Then at that point, there's I'm always working.
Can I monetize pacing around my house? Because that would be like...
So my problem is that I often don't try to monetize things. So I do a lot of things where I'm like, if I put in enough goodwill, I will eventually be able to make money from this. And I have never learned my fucking lesson. Like, even now, like, if people come to me, I'm always saying, like, I'm gonna do less. But if someone comes to me and they're like, hey, like, would you be able to help playtest our game? Or, hey, would you be able to help join this group where you know, help us vet games for this event? Of fucking course I wanna do that. Like, and my first question is never, what is my compensation going to be? Because that question makes me feel gross. And also because as a woman in the industry, as a woman in general, as a person with imposter syndrome, I'm like, I don't deserve to get paid. So I'm finally learning to say questions like, I would absolutely love to help. How will I be compensated? And it's very hard to find the vocabulary, not feel like you're being a bitch, and, you know, accept that you deserve to be paid for what you're doing. So I have the total opposite problem.
Okay, first of all, be a bitch, because bitches get shit done. So, no, sorry. I have contracts in place. If you're not going to pay me, I'm getting the fuck out of here. Like, that's my rule.
So you're hired.
Second, to me, the way that you're phrasing that question, it actually doesn't sound like it's an issue with monetization. It sounds like it's an issue with either you're creatively stifled and you don't want to try something new because you're sort of like on this consistent path, or two, you don't know your boundaries yet. So I would say maybe like whatever you feel like you should be doing, so like, oh, this should be a YouTube series, this should be XYZ, go with ABC instead of XYZ, or be like, I'm not going to have anything to do with this YouTube series. Like, this is as far as this is going to go.
Or ask the question why you're trying to monetize everything. If there's like some underlying meaning behind that.
Yeah, do you like money or something?
Well, I mean, you get to.
It smells funny. It's like, ugh.
I think for
More
me,
money, more
sometimes
problems?
taking an idea to that level also allows me, it almost gives me the, I'm giving myself the ability to invest in it, and I'm giving myself the ability to say that this is important in my time. And so I think that's why sometimes I'm like, oh, what kind of hustle can I do here? But it's really just a way of my brain kind of going, is this going to be worth it for you, Jen? And I'm not sure if that's a good or a bad thing, but I think for one thing I'm trying to do is like, well, it's good because that's what I want to do, but, I don't think in the gig economy it's so bad all the time, so, yeah.
I'm not sure there's really an answer to this question, but I've run into, you mentioned like when your hobby turns into a stress and sort of feeling coping with that. Whenever I run into that, I usually just say, I don't do this anymore. I don't want to stress my life. Like, I don't know, I went to film school and realized, making movies isn't as fun as watching them. Or, playing it on my MOBA and you get super competitive to the point where I'm not playing a game anymore. I'm, in this hyper-competitive mode that's not that stress-relaxed anymore. And you seem to have already, gone past that barrier already, but I don't know if there's any sort of that makes you think about, like, how you get over that wall or the value of going over that wall.
For me, it was kind of picking something that was not my entire life. So like tabletop gaming was in my life, but it wasn't everything. So me, like I went to school for English and graphic design, and like there was a certain point when reading books and analyzing and all that stuff that something clicked, and I went, oh, now every time I read a book, it's not going to be fun anymore. This is awesome.
Oh, I learned what symbolism is. Goodbye.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, cool, everything has a meaning now. Awesome, this sucks. So with tabletop, I kind of thought that was going to happen. I saw it 5 miles down the road, and I went, it's okay. I'll say goodbye to this. And then I started doing it. I know. But to go back to, I'm sorry, but to go back to Nicole's point, this is why I love coming to conventions all the time, because I get to play games with awesome people. Like they're like sitting up in a lobby until 2 a.m. playing games with my friends that makes games fun for me. When I am at home and I am playing games with people at home, like that's a huge fucking stress for me. So like, I guess being able to like it, like if I do this, it's going to not be fun. You might have to sacrifice something, I guess.
I think also like sometimes one of the harshest realizations is that sometimes shitty feelings are just, they kind of just don't go away, right? Like it's true. Like sometimes like the day before PAX, I could not leave my Airbnb for whatever reason. I was just like, nope, not gonna happen. And if this was like 3 years ago, I would have fought against that 100%. I would have gone out. I probably would have gotten really drunk somewhere just to be like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And sitting with the uncomfortableness and just sitting with it and just acknowledging like, this feels shitty, whatever this is right now. Like, I feel like an imposter. I feel like XYZ, whatever it is. Like, it's also okay to just kind of sit with that. And that may not be the best advice that I have, but I do think there is something sort of powerful to just kind of sit there and acknowledge like, this doesn't feel good. Okay, I just kind of need to sit with it, because most likely it's gonna go away a lot quicker than if you try to fight it.
I adore you. I had the same like Thursday morning, I was crying and I was like, I am so stressed out. And the thing that depressed me the most was that I just wanted PAX to be over. And I live in Philly, and I've been looking forward to this for like months and months and months. And like that feeling broke my heart. And let me just tell you about another self-help book that I read. It's called Self-Compassion, and it is written by a white woman, and it's full of really bizarre entitled white woman stories. But in between this woman's super really weird life is the most wonderful advice about self-compassion. And a lot of it is sit with yourself, acknowledge yourself, and do not fight those feelings. Like if you're like, I feel like garbage and I just want to cry, dude, fucking cry. Like let yourself feel bad, because once you get it out, you're gonna feel way, way, way better.
I also recommend getting older.
Yeah, no, it's so true.
As someone who is in my late 40s, it's pretty damn cool. I gotta say, it's good. It's good stuff.
You give so fewer fucks.
Oh my God, so many.
It's unreal.
So many are gone. They were all spent in my 20s.
To that point, I almost didn't come to PAX. I was like literally packing up the truck. We were trying to get here before 5 o'clock on Wednesday because you can load in early if you drove your truck in early. And we got 2 hours away from Boston, and my girlfriend called me and she goes, "Do you have the car key?" And I went, "Fuck."
Oh,
And
no.
so we had to drive 2 hours back in rush hour traffic in the morning on Wednesday morning. And I got out of the car and I went to give her the key, and I turned around and I was like, maybe I'm just gonna go in the house and not come. And then I just kept going. I was like, no, I guess I'm just
I'm
gonna
so
go.
glad you're here.
I am so excited to hear that we all hated life before PAX.
Yes.
I feel so much better.
Thank you. I was going to add, there's another self-help book.
Oh my gosh.
Not giving thought. It's very good.
Oh. So we have a little less than 5 minutes, so we'll get through these last two.
Cool.
All right, I'll ask quickly. It sounds like all of you had full-time jobs before you got into the tabletop industry. Some of you are still doing things outside of the tabletop industry, and all of you have many projects inside the tabletop industry. I'm one of the people who's trying to become like you. I have a full-time job, and I'd like to add something. Your problem. So my question
Run.
is, this is a little counterintuitive, but we've been talking about, making sure your life stays in balance. But I'm sure there's times when you look at, what you have to do, your life, and say, I need my life to be unbalanced for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of
Absolutely.
what I'm asking is, do you have any particular signals that come your way when you're like, all right, it is going to be okay if I let my life become unbalanced for a while?
Yeah, so there was a point last year where I was working full-time, finishing up graduate school, and of course I said yes to being an adjunct professor at a local college teaching history of game design. Yeah, so I spent a lot of time crying, and I spent a lot of time, and we also went to 28 events last year. So
Oh my God.
I was definitely I reached, it was the first time in my life that I saw and acknowledged that threshold of I might have a nervous breakdown. And I had to just sit with myself. I had to spend a lot of time recentering myself, crying in the bathroom a little bit, and just being extremely fucking frank with people. If people were like, hey, I need your time, I was very much I cannot give it to you. I don't have it. And I really had to learn how to prioritize things and what could get trimmed and what could happen later.
Talk to people. I mean, I legit, I'm at that point right now. I'm freaking out because I'm doing so much shit, and I'm probably gonna talk to people up here about I don't know what to not do. So talk to people. Don't just sit there and internalize and be like, I got this. I'm gonna figure out my shit. No, go talk to people.
It's really important to develop a network of people that you can trust, and that's completely up to you, however large or small you want that to be. But if that's 2 people that you're it's your best friends, it's your parents, it's your partner, whoever it is, and if they say to you at any point, you're doing too much, you can't do this, that is a huge sign that it's oh, all right, it's time for me to I need to be balanced, or things are super unbalanced because this person who has my best intentions they're probably right, and I should probably listen to them.
That's my husband. That's my husband for me, yeah.
Yeah, you need honest people who will actually tell you what you need to hear and not what they think you need to hear. They're not just trying to make you feel better about things. They're no, you need to fucking stop that shit. You need to calm down.
My early warning flags are, do I have enough energy to be a good partner? So if my partner needs me to listen, am I taking care of myself enough to have that reserve to kind of put my stuff aside a little bit and be a good partner? And the same thing with my animals. And am I taking good care of them? That's my responsibility. And those are my little my little early warning indication system where I can work a lot if I wanted to. I can have weeds in my yard. There can be a lot of dishes in the sink, but if I don't have the reserves for those things, then I sure as hell am not taking care of myself enough to, because those are just being a human in the world for me. And I think once you lose them, no matter what industry you are in, it's harder to get them back when you kind of cross over those lines.
One of the things that I don't do is eat. I am very bad at feeding myself. So if my husband says, "Are you just hungry?" Like, first of all, don't ask a girl that. If she's mad, she's probably hungry. But also maybe she's right, but she's probably hungry.
Yeah.
But she might be both. So yeah.
Just
She's
slide a
hangry.
sandwich in her direction.
Yeah. Don't even ask me, am I hungry? Offer me a bag of Doritos or a sandwich. Yeah.
So I
Some
guess
avocado toast.
the most important advice is always carry snacks in your pockets. Just in case.
Oh no, that's the best con advice. No,
Snacks.
seriously,
Snacks in
always have
pockets.
snacks. At PAX East, we had this giant Kickstarter room, and I went a little overboard, and people were kind of making fun of me for it, but I think people ended up being extremely thankful. And I made individual snack bags of complex carbohydrates. Like, I got super, because I had to take a bunch of nutrition
Science the
classes.
shit
That's
out
what
of
happens when
this.
you go into eating disorder recovery. And so having the nutritional background, I was like, I made like complex carbohydrates, simple carbohydrates, because simple carbohydrates give you really quick fuels. Complex carbohydrates will keep you fuller longer. I had like little pieces of protein, individual snack bags, an entire bag. And I was like, you cannot eat this in the room. You can eat this in the back of the room, and you can eat this outside of the room. But you are welcome to any of these snack bags. And those snack bags were gone in 2 days.
So I'm sorry, we are actually out of time, but we can take your question outside, if that's okay. Okay.
Quick.
Green.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Fuck
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes, very much.
100%.
Thank you all so much for coming, really, thank you.